I've been getting a lot of comments asking how I keep from draining my savings now that I'm living on one income. And I understand why people ask, because when Frank was here, the math had two sides to it: his Social Security, my pension, his habits, my habits, our mortgage, which thank goodness was paid off in 2018, Medicare decisions, property taxes, groceries, the little budget Frank kept in that spreadsheet of his, with the tabs color-coded because he was a civil engineer and apparently could not help himself. Now it's just me. One Social Security survivor benefit, one pension from the school district, one house, one grocery cart, one person standing in the kitchen deciding if the roof noise is normal or if it's going to cost $700. This is the part nobody puts in the retirement brochure. The hardest part of protecting my savings was not learning the numbers. It was learning to believe that I was allowed to make decisions alone. I had lived inside a partnership for a long time. Frank was the planner, I was the talker. He did the spreadsheet, I did the phone calls. We had a system. Then the system became a notebook on the table, and me, sitting there with a cup of tea, trying not to turn every bill into a small emergency. I don't drain my savings because I got brave all at once. I don't think that's how it works. I avoid it because I made a few small rules, and because I learned which feelings were making me spend money. That second part surprised me. Money can look like math. Sometimes it's grief wearing a practical coat. There were a few months when I was almost embarrassed by how often I checked the accounts. I would open the bank app like it was going to tell me whether I was doing Widowhood correctly. It never did. It just showed numbers. Numbers are useful. They are not comfort. I had to learn that slowly, and with a certain amount of squinting at my phone. The exact fear was simple. I was afraid I would make one bad decision, then another, and slowly use up the money Frank and I had spent 40 years being careful with. Not all at once. That would almost be easier to notice. I was afraid of the slow leak, a roof repair, a dental bill, a trip to see David in Oregon, a new appliance, a grocery bill that got away from me, a month where I felt lonely and said yes to everything because sitting home alone was harder than spending $42 at lunch. You wake up and the house is quiet and the bills are still coming, and that feels exposed. Not good weird, just weird. When Frank was here, even a hard bill felt like something we looked at together. Now I look at it myself. I'm not going to give you a 5-step system. I'm just going to tell you what happened and what I figured out. I want to be honest about the numbers because vague is not helpful, but I also want to be honest about the feeling underneath the numbers. That part matters too. I'm sitting at the dining room table with Frank's laptop open. This was maybe 6 months after I retired. The house was very quiet. Not sad quiet exactly, just that afternoon quiet that seems to notice you're alone. I had made tea and then forgotten to drink it. Frank's spreadsheet was open on the screen. He had named it Retirement Plan Final, which makes me smile now, because of course he had 3 older versions in the folder. Final, Final Updated, Final Actual Final. He would have had an opinion about that. There was a tab for monthly expenses. There was a tab for travel. There was a tab for the national parks. Yellowstone was highlighted. He wanted to do that one first. I wasn't looking at Yellowstone that afternoon. I was looking at the monthly column. Social Security Survivor Benefit, $1,890. My pension, $1,240. Total, $3,130. Then the expenses: property tax and insurance, utilities, groceries, Medicare supplement, car insurance, gas, phone, church, the small things that don't look like much until they all stand together. The total was around $1,444. That left about $1,686 if nothing unusual happened. And something unusual always happens eventually. I remember taking a pen and writing on a yellow sticky note, "This is enough if I tell it where to go." Then I cried. Not a big cry, just enough to make the sticky note curl a little at the corner. Because that was the first time I saw the new math clearly. The math was not hopeless, but it was mine now. So I want to go through 5 things I do to keep from draining my savings on a single income. These are not rules for everyone. They're just the things that have helped me. Some are practical, some are emotional. Most are both, which is what I keep learning about money now. The first thing I did was separate my savings from my monthly life. That sounds obvious. It was not obvious to my nervous system. When Frank was alive, we had savings for emergencies and plans, house things, travel things, car things, the kind of things people save for when they assume there will be 2 of them discussing it. After he died, the savings started to feel like a safety blanket. I wanted to see it. I wanted to know it was there. I wanted to open the account and look at the number, just to settle myself. There is nothing wrong with checking, but I realized I was treating the savings like emotional medicine, and emotional medicine is easy to take too often. The first year alone, I moved money out of savings for things that were not emergencies. Not terrible things, a new chair for the guest room, extra meals out when Jen visited, a few home things I told myself would make the house feel less empty. Some of them did help. Some of them were just purchases wearing a little hat that said, "Healing." I don't say that harshly. I was doing the best I could. But one morning I looked at the transfer history and saw 4 withdrawals in 1 month. None of them huge. That was the problem. $75, $120, $200. Little scoops. Frank would have noticed the pattern. I had to become the person who noticed it. So I made a rule for myself. Savings is not for mood. Savings is not for boredom. Savings is not for making Tuesday feel better unless Tuesday has a broken water heater. I keep my checking account for the month. I keep a small cushion there. Not too much, just enough that I don't feel panicked over groceries or gas. The bigger savings sits separately. I can get to it, but not casually. That little bit of distance has saved me from myself more than once. The second thing I did was give every regular dollar a job before the month started. I know, that sounds like something from a budgeting book. Frank would have loved that sentence. He liked any sentence that made money behave. I get $3,130 a month between the survivor benefit and my pension. I say that number out loud because I know many widows are doing similar math and wondering if they're the only ones. They're not. My regular expenses are about $1,444 in a normal month. That's the house costs, utilities, groceries, Medicare supplement, car expenses, phone, church, and the ordinary personal things. So I decided that before the month started, I would send $800 to savings, not at the end, at the beginning. Because if I waited until the end, the money got friendly with other ideas. A lunch after church, a sale at Belk, a birthday gift for Ella that became a birthday gift plus a sweater because the sweater was right there. A little extra at the grocery store because I was tired and the prepared chicken looked better than cooking. None of those things are wrong by themselves, but together they can become the slow leak. So the $800 goes first. The remaining money is what I live with, around $886 after the regular bills and savings. Some months it's plenty, some months it's a little tighter, and if something unusual comes up, I look at the month before I look at savings. Can I move the hair appointment? Can I skip the extra lunch? Can I use what I already have in the freezer? Can I wait 2 weeks? Waiting has become a tool, not deprivation, just waiting. I don't fully understand why waiting feels more powerful now than it did when I was younger. Maybe because when I was younger, waiting felt like being told no. Now it feels like giving myself time to think. That has kept more money in my savings than any clever trick. The third thing I do is make room for the things that always happen. This was one of Frank's lessons, though he would not have called it a lesson. He would have called it common sense and then gone to look for a wrench. The first year alone, I kept saying, well, this was an unusual month. Then it happened again and again. The car needed new tires. The dentist found something. The insurance went up. The garbage disposal made a sound I can only describe as dramatic. At some point, I realized unusual months are part of the usual year. That changed how I looked at the budget. I made a line for house maintenance. I made a line for medical extras. I made a line for travel to see family. I made a line for grandchildren because I am not going to pretend that I won't send physical cards with a little money tucked inside. That's not a financial strategy. That's grandmothering. I started small, 25 here, 50 there, whatever I could set aside without making the month feel squeezed. There is a small account I call not surprised. That is not what the bank calls it. That is what I call it in my notebook. When the car battery died last winter, I used the not surprised money. I was still annoyed. I think annoyance is allowed, but I was not frightened. That is a very different feeling. The old me would have pulled from savings and then worried for 3 days. The newer me paid it, wrote it down, and made tea. Not calmly at first, more like a woman imitating calm until it arrived. But it worked. Some days are better than others. That was a better one. The fourth thing I do is tell myself the truth before I spend money for emotional reasons. This one is tender. After Frank died, there were evenings when the house felt too large. Not every evening, but enough. I would finish dinner, 1 plate, 1 fork, 1 glass. I would clean up in 6 minutes because cooking for one does not leave much evidence. Then I would feel the empty stretch between dinner and bedtime. That was when I was most likely to spend money. Not big money, online little money. A cardigan, a book, a kitchen gadget, something for the plant shelf, something for the grandchildren, something that made a package arrive 2 days later, so the future had a small appointment in it. I don't judge myself for that, I really don't. But I had to become honest about it. I was not always buying the thing. Sometimes I was buying the knock on the door. Once I understood that, I could pause. Not always stop, let's be clear. I still own a small ceramic bird I cannot explain. But I pause. I ask, am I buying this because I need it, because I want it, or because I don't want to feel this evening? Those are 3 different answers. If I need it, fine. If I want it and the money is in the spending category, sometimes fine. If I don't want to feel the evening, I try something else first. I call Patty. My sister is widowed too, and she is what I call my advanced scout. She is 8 years ahead of me in this process, and she has very little patience for nonsense. Or I take my tea into Frank's chair and read for 20 minutes. Or I write down the thing I want to buy and wait until morning. Morning is much less impressed by ceramic birds. There is another small thing I do. I keep a list called later, maybe. It is not a no list. It is not a shame list. It is just a place for things that caught my eye when I was tired, lonely, or convinced that a new lamp would change the emotional weather in the living room. Sometimes I go back 2 weeks later and still want the thing. Sometimes I look at it and think, well, Carol, that was clearly an 8:30 at night idea. The list has saved me more than once. This has saved my savings in a quiet way, not because it stops all spending, because it stops the spending from having a job money cannot do. Money can pay a bill. It cannot make the other chair at dinner full again. It took me a while to stop asking it to try. The fifth thing I do is ask for help before a decision becomes expensive. This one was hard for me. I was a teacher for years, then a curriculum coordinator, then a consultant. I am used to being competent. I am used to being the person who knows which form goes where. Widowhood rearranged that. After Frank died, there were tasks that made me feel like I had been handed someone else's class halfway through the year. The sprinkler system, the gutters, the car maintenance schedule, the difference between a small roof concern and a large roof concern, which seems like information everyone else received in a booklet I missed. For a while, I tried to handle things alone because I didn't want Jen to worry. Jen is my daughter. She is wonderful. She is also efficient in a way that can feel like a clipboard walking into the room. If I tell her the garbage disposal is making noise, she has 3 contractors and a calendar invite before I finish the sentence. I love her for this. I also sometimes need to remain an adult in my own house. So I learned to be specific. I don't call Jen and say, I'm overwhelmed. I call and say, can you look at these 2 estimates with me for 10 minutes? That works better for both of us. I call David on Sundays when the question is less urgent and more emotional. He is softer. He asks about Frank without getting nervous. Once, when I had 2 estimates for tree work, one was $650 and one was $1,900. That gap alone made me want to close the folder and eat crackers for dinner. I called a neighbor named Ruth, whose husband used the same company last year. She came over, looked at the paper, and said, "This one is trying to scare you." That was helpful. We chose the $650 company. They did good work. That one phone call kept me from spending an extra $1,250 because I was afraid of choosing wrong. Fear is expensive. That is something I know now. The sixth thing, though I know I said 5, is that I keep the house decision separate from everyday fear. The house is the biggest question. It has been the biggest question since Frank died. The mortgage is paid off. Frank wanted that done before retirement, and I am grateful for it every month. I say that often because it is true often. But a paid-off house is not a free house. There are taxes, insurance, repairs, yard work, the upstairs room I rarely use, the garage that still has Frank's tools arranged in a way I do not fully understand. Every few months I ask whether I should sell. Jen thinks I should at least consider something smaller. David says, "Mom, you don't have to decide because other people are uncomfortable with the question." That is very David. Frank would have had an opinion about this. He always did. I don't know exactly what he would say now. I don't pretend I do. So I made myself a boundary. I do not make house decisions on lonely days. I do not make them after a repair bill. I do not make them after visiting Jen and seeing how easy it would be to have dinner with her family more often. Those are feelings, real feelings, but not the whole picture. Instead, I look at the house numbers once a quarter. Property tax, insurance, utilities, repairs, what I spent, what I expect, what I can handle. Then I write one sentence in the notebook. This quarter, staying still makes sense. So far, that has been the sentence. Someday it may change, but I don't want to drain savings because I was too afraid to move, and I don't want to sell a good house because I had one hard Sunday. Both can be mistakes. The notebook helps me see the difference. I think what I'm really saying is that living on one income is not only about spending less. Sometimes it is about panicking less. The numbers matter. They matter very much. But the feeling you bring to the numbers can change everything. If I look at my budget while frightened, every bill looks like a threat. If I look at it while steady, it looks like information. Still not fun information, let's not get carried away, but information. Frank's spreadsheet gave me a place to start. My notebook gave me a way to continue. The savings account is still there because I stopped asking it to solve loneliness, uncertainty, and every small surprise. I don't always get it right. Last month, I spent more than I planned on plants for the back porch. I could justify it by saying they make me happy. They do. I could also say 4 plants would have made me happy, and I bought 7. Both things are true. That's why I still write it down, not to punish myself, to stay awake to my own life. I am aware I am fortunate. I have the survivor benefit. I have my pension. I have a paid-off house. I have children who will take my call, and a sister who tells me when I'm being dramatic in a very loving Indiana way. Not everyone has those things. I don't say any of this as a woman who has it harder than everyone else. I say it as a woman whose retirement plan had 2 people in it, and then one day it didn't. The math changed. The house changed. The grocery cart changed. And I changed too, though not all at once. I used to think protecting savings meant being strict. Now I think it means being honest. Honest about bills. Honest about fear. Honest about the difference between a real emergency and a lonely evening with a catalog. That honesty has done more for me than being strict ever did. If you're living on one income in retirement or getting close to it, leave a comment and tell me what part of the new math has been hardest for you. Is it the grocery bill? The house repairs? The medical costs? The adult children trying to help, sometimes a little too much? The fear of touching savings at all? Or the opposite problem, using savings for things that are really feelings? You don't have to give exact numbers unless you want to, but if you're comfortable, those numbers help people. I learned that from this channel. A widow in Ohio saying, "My electric bill is $168, can make another widow in Georgia feel less alone." That still amazes me a little. Jen says I shouldn't read the comments right before bed because then I think about all of you. She's probably right. But I do read them, and I appreciate the way you tell the truth kindly. Okay, I think that's what I wanted to say. Thanks for being here.